At the settlement meeting, they looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We want the house, the cars, the company, everything." Their voices were cold flat like they were ordering off a menu. Years of family ties. Everything my grandfather built with his own hands reduced to a transaction they wanted closed fast. My lawyer, Margaret Ellis, grabbed my arm so hard I thought she'd leave bruises. She leaned in and whispered, "Diana, don't do this. We can fight this." I looked across the table. They were smiling, small, confident smiles, the kind winners wear before the game is even over. I said, "Give it all to them." The room went silent. Margaret dropped her pen. Their smiles flickered for a second, then widened. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I was surrendering. Everyone in that room thought the same thing. But they had no idea what they were really taking. The final court hearing came. They sat there dressed like they were heading to a celebration, already planning how to spend what they believed was theirs. I signed every page of the transfer documents without hesitation. My lawyer looked like she was attending a funeral. Then the courtroom doors opened. 2 federal agents walked in, handed an envelope to their attorney. He read it, went pale, leaned over, and whispered 5 words into their ears. The smiles vanished. My sister screamed first. In that moment, I didn't look at them. I just looked at the ring my grandfather left me on my finger. My name is Diana Whitaker, and this is the story of how I lost everything and won. If this story hits close to home, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me which part got to you the most. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. We've got more coming every week. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. Thanks for watching. I grew up in the suburbs just outside Detroit, in a quiet neighborhood where the hum of industry always lingered in the background. My grandfather, Harold Whitaker, founded Whitaker Tool and Die in the 70s, starting with nothing more than a single garage, a handful of basic tools, and an old lathe he'd bought secondhand. He believed in crafting molds and dies with absolute precision, the kind that big auto manufacturers could rely on without question. The shop became my world early on. I'd tag along after school, perched on a worn stool while he demonstrated how to grip a micrometer or align a workpiece perfectly. He'd explain tolerances in simple terms, showing why a 1/10 of a thousandth could make or break a part for assembly lines downtown. The place carried constant scents: sharp cutting fluid, warm steel shavings, coffee from the pot he kept brewing all day. Machines whirred steadily, metal chips piling up like silver snow. He shared stories during those long afternoons: how he landed his first real contract with a supplier who needed custom dies fast, how he worked nights to meet deadlines figuring out complex shapes other shops avoided, how he hired his first employee, then another, expanding into a proper building with overhead cranes and better equipment. He never boasted. He just wanted me to see that success came from reliability and effort. I couldn't get enough of it. While friends played sports or went to movies, I rode shotgun with him on deliveries, watching him discuss blueprints with engineers at massive plants. I saw him solve problems on site, tweaking designs, suggesting material changes that saved time and cost. Clients trusted him completely. His handshake meant more than pages of fine print. As time passed, I noticed differences in how the family viewed the business. My parents rarely stopped by, and when they did, they focused on the mess or noise. Brianna avoided it altogether, complaining about grease stains or outdated machinery. Grandfather observed quietly, disappointment flickering when topics turned to the shop. He began entrusting me with real tasks. I ran small production jobs, contacted suppliers for quotes, handled scheduling. He walked me through profit margins, inventory control, customer relations. More than numbers, he emphasized reputation, delivering on promises, standing behind work, treating workers fairly. One quiet evening, as we locked up, he surveyed the floor and said, "This isn't just about money, Diana. It's about honor. We build things that last and we treat people right. Only you seem to get that. His words stuck. The others showed little interest in daily operations or challenges. Brianna dismissed it as manual labor. My parents spoke of eventual sale or retirement windfall, never the craft or clients. Grandfather's confidence in me grew. He included me in decisions about new tooling investments, expansion ideas, long-term contracts. We spent hours reviewing prints, debating efficiency improvements, mapping growth, without compromising quality. When his strength faded, he relied on me more heavily. I managed most day-to-day while he oversaw from his desk. He made certain I understood every aspect, from machine maintenance to financial oversight. Then came the morning he didn't show up. Heart attack sudden and final. The loss hit hard, the shop silent without his presence. At the will, reading terms were straightforward and public. He left the entire operation, buildings, equipment, accounts, the house, everything, to me. He trusted I'd preserve what he created. Holding those documents, grief mixed with determination. The responsibility felt immense, but I vowed to carry it forward the way he intended. I married young, still in my early 20s, to someone I met through a project at the shop. He worked as an engineer for one of our regular clients, and our conversation started over blueprints and deadlines. We bonded quickly over shared ambitions and late-night discussions about the future. It seemed like the right step at the time. Sophia arrived soon after, a curious baby with wide eyes and a quick smile that lit up every room. 2 years on, Mason joined us, a bundle of nonstop energy who kept us chasing from the moment he learned to crawl. Those first years overflowed with discovery. First steps, first words, messy meals that ended in laughter. The house filled with constant activity. Toys spread across floors, children's drawings taped to walls, weekends spent at local festivals or backyard barbecues with neighbors. Holidays meant traditions we started together, decorating cookies, building blanket forts, reading the same stories until pages wore thin. I juggled shop responsibilities with motherhood, rushing home to bedtime routines that stretched long because no one wanted the day to end. For a stretch, everything aligned. We planned vacations to nearby lakes, saved for bigger dreams, celebrated small wins like new contracts or school milestones. Sophia's questions about how things worked echoed grandfather's lessons. Mason's fearless climbing reminded me of my own childhood curiosity around machines. But differences surfaced gradually. My husband struggled with the unpredictable hours the business demanded, urgent fixes for clients, seasonal rushes that kept me late. He wanted more predictable evenings, spontaneous trips, less talk about production issues. Conversations shifted from partnership to frustration over divided attention. Arguments built slowly. He felt the shop came first. I felt unsupported in carrying grandfather's expectations. Attempts to balance, date nights, shared chores, helped temporarily but didn't resolve the core mismatch. He saw the company as a demanding job. I saw it as legacy and livelihood intertwined. The gap widened. Shared plans dissolved into separate routines. We attended counseling sessions hoping neutral ground would bridge things, but old patterns returned. When Sophia was in first grade and Mason starting preschool, we agreed separation was healthier than constant tension. The divorce process stayed civil. Mediated agreements, no courtroom battles. Custody split evenly on paper with schedules built around school and work. I kept the smaller home near the shop for stability, focusing on smooth transitions for the children. Adjusting to single parenting brought new rhythms. Mornings rushed with breakfasts and backpacks, afternoons filled with pickups and snacks. I handled homework at the dining table, answered questions about why Dad lived elsewhere with age-appropriate honesty. Nights meant tucking them in alone, reading extra pages to fill quiet spaces. Weekends offered breathing room. I'd load them into the car for outings, zoos where Mason fed giraffes, museums where Sophia sketched exhibits. We baked together on rainy days, experimented with recipes that sometimes succeeded, sometimes burned. Laughter returned in full force during those unstructured hours. I brought them to the shop occasionally when crews were off. They explored open areas, safely touching cool metal parts, asking about tools. I demonstrated simple measurements, let them trace patterns on paper, turning lessons into play. Sophia drew imaginative designs. Mason stacked scrap pieces into towers. Those visits strengthened our trio, creating memories tied to the place grandfather loved. The experience reshaped my view on relationships. Not all connections endure, even those sealed with promises or shared history. Some drift when priorities diverge, no villain required. It highlighted the value of effort over assumption, choice over obligation. With the marriage behind me, energy redirected fully. I leaned harder into raising Sophia and Mason while increasing involvement at the shop, as grandfather needed more assistance. Evenings often shifted between children's activities and business reviews, balancing both worlds as best I could. He appreciated the commitment, frequently commenting on my role as the reliable anchor amid changing times. Those acknowledgments reinforced direction, preparing ground for what lay ahead. After grandfather's passing, I stepped fully into running the company, handling everything from client calls to production schedules. The days blurred with responsibility, leaving little room for anything else. My parents, Richard and Diane, began reaching out more frequently. Phone calls turned into visits, expressions of sympathy evolving into offers of help. Brianna joined those conversations, mentioning how hard it must be managing alone with the kids. They decided to relocate closer, finding a place only a short drive away. The reason sounded reasonable: being near for Sophia and Mason, assisting with school drops or unexpected needs. I appreciated the gesture. Balancing the shop's demands with parenting stretched me thin, sleep often cut short by overdue reports or a child's nightmare. They started appearing at the facility often. Richard inspected machinery, suggesting minor adjustments based on vague memories from years back. Diane organized lunch deliveries for the team, lingering to chat with longtime workers. Brianna proved most eager, noticing my exhaustion with spreadsheets and proposing to oversee finances. "Let me take that weight off," she offered. "You handle manufacturing and customers." Worn out from constant juggling, I accepted. Family involvement seemed like a lifeline after solo years. It allowed more focus on actual operations, trusting blood ties would prevent issues. Initial periods ran without hiccups. Bills paid promptly, statements arrived neatly, compiled balances held steady. I gained breathing space, arriving home earlier for dinners with Sophia and Mason. Gradually, irregularities appeared. Significant outgoing payments for items outside normal categories, large sums labeled vaguely as supplier advances or maintenance contracts. When I questioned Brianna, responses stayed surface level, necessary for better terms or preventive upgrades. Details remained scarce, supporting documents delayed. Richard dismissed my concerns whenever raised. "She's saving us money in the long run." Diane suggested I was overly cautious, attributing it to fatigue. Their immediate defense of Brianna felt coordinated, shielding rather than clarifying. I observed shifts in their attitude toward the operation. Discussions moved from production challenges to revenue figures, potential liquidity ways to access funds faster. Brianna commented on account balances casually, as if they were personal savings. Richard brought up retirement plans again, calculating timelines based on current valuation. Diane browsed real estate listings during stops at my house, talking about downsizing or relocating somewhere warmer. Family gatherings at home included subtle probes about distributing burdens more evenly or ensuring everyone shares in the success. Brianna's gaze lingered on recent equipment purchases, assessing value rather than function. The change accumulated quietly but persistently. What once represented craftsmanship and commitment now appeared to them as a convenient resource, capital, ready for redistribution. Their visits focused less on support, more on possibilities for personal gain. I downplayed growing doubts, convincing myself suspicion stemmed from overwork. They were relatives, after all, bound by shared history. Questioning motives felt disloyal, yet patterns persisted. Unexplained deductions, postponed reconciliations, rationales growing thinner. The business grandfather cherished no longer seemed sacred to them. It resembled an opportunity for quick benefit legacy secondary to immediate advantage. The unease settled deeper, a quiet alarm I couldn't fully silence. I decided to pick up Sophia and Mason early that afternoon, since Mason had a minor cough, and I wanted to get them home for rest before it worsened. The drive from school took the usual route past familiar streets, and on impulse I turned toward the shop to collect a folder I'd left behind. The parking area looked ordinary, a few employee cars still there despite the hour. Entering through the side door, the building seemed unusually hushed. No typical clatter from the floor, no voices carrying over machinery. I headed down the hallway toward my office, but light spilling from the conference room caught my attention. The door stood partially open, muffled words filtering out. I paused, then pushed it wider. Richard, Diane, and Brianna sat around the large table, documents scattered in organized piles. Brianna was mid-signature on a stack of forms, pen moving steadily. Invoices and transfer requests lay nearby, several bearing company letterhead with figures that jumped out immediately, tens of thousands, some higher. They looked up simultaneously, surprise freezing their movements. I stepped fully inside. What exactly is this? Brianna set the pen down, slowly gathering pages. Routine payments. Catching up on vendor balances. I approached the table, scanning the top document. A wire transfer authorization to an unfamiliar LLC for specialized consulting, $45,000. Another for raw material procurement to a different entity, $60,000. No corresponding purchase orders or quotes I recognized. These vendors aren't in our approved list. Where are the bids? The approvals. Richard shifted in his chair. Diana, you're jumping to conclusions. Brianna's streamlining things. These are legitimate operational costs. Diane reached for a folder, voice soft but firm. We're trying to help lighten your load. Trust us a little. I picked up one of the transfers. Help. This is moving large sums without my knowledge. Explain the consulting. Who provided it? What services? Brianna's tone sharpened. You delegated finances to me. I don't need sign-off for every transaction. These secure discounts ensure supply chain stability. Stability. These companies have no history with us. I spread several forms across the surface. Addresses traced to P.O. boxes or empty offices. This isn't optimization. Richard's face reddened. Enough. You're accusing us without proof. We've been more involved than you acknowledge. Diane added, eyes glistening. After everything we've done for this family, you treat us like strangers. The accusation stung, but anger overrode it. Involved? You show up after grandfather's gone, take over books, and now this. How long has it been going on? Brianna leaned back. You're paranoid. Running the place alone has made you suspicious of everyone. I've kept things afloat while you focus on the kids. Afloat by draining accounts? I gestured at the piles. These aren't expenses. They're diversions. Richard stood abruptly. Watch your words. We're your parents. We raised you, supported your choices. Grandfather's will was unfair. He wasn't thinking clearly at the end, influenced by your constant presence. Diane nodded. Medication clouded his judgment. He didn't mean to exclude us entirely. We provided emotional care for years. That deserves recognition. Brianna jumped in. Exactly. I've managed finances competently. I deserve compensation, part ownership. You've hoarded everything. The room heated quickly. Voices rose, overlapping. I demanded immediate access, freeze, full records turnover. They refused, Richard insisting on legal review first. Diane accused me of tearing apart what family remained. Brianna claimed her efforts went unappreciated, that she'd earned equity through sweat. I countered with specifics. Missing backups, altered logs, patterns no honest manager would create. Richard dismissed it as inexperience on my part. Diane pleaded for understanding, saying stress made me see enemies where there were none. The exchange turned raw. Brianna declared outright that without her the company would have faltered. Richard threatened to involve authorities if I locked them out. Diane wept openly, saying I was destroying our bond over money. Finally, Richard delivered the blow. We'll file to contest the will. Undue influence, diminished capacity, plus our contributions as direct heirs. A judge will see reason. Fair division for everyone. Brianna added coldly, I've run things better lately. I should have a larger role. We'll prove it. They collected the documents, warning against interference until counsel advised. The door closed behind them with finality. I stood alone amid scattered copies, heart pounding. The confrontation exposed everything, not misunderstanding, but calculated intent. They viewed grandfather's legacy as divisible spoils, their support a pretext for control. The fight had only begun. I didn't confront them again right away. Public accusations would only give them time to cover tracks or shift blame. Instead, I searched for a professional who could dig deeper without alerting anyone. Through a discreet recommendation from a longtime client who'd dealt with similar issues, I connected with Paul Kendrick, a certified forensic accountant specializing in business fraud cases. Our first meeting took place in his downtown office, neutral and professional. I brought printed copies of suspicious transactions I'd managed to save, plus access logs showing changes made outside normal hours. Paul listened carefully, asking pointed questions about delegation of authority, signature protocols, and banking setups. He agreed to review everything under strict confidentiality, signing an agreement that kept my name out of initial inquiries. The process stretched over several weeks. I exported data during off hours, scanning old files from archived drives, forwarding emails that seemed innocuous at the time, but now raised flags. Paul analyzed from his end using specialized software to map fund flows, identify patterns, and verify vendor legitimacy. Early findings confirmed my worst fears. Routine payments routed to newly formed LLCs with no online presence or business history. Addresses traced to mail drops or vacant properties. Invoices generated for services never rendered. Consulting on process optimization, bulk purchases of raw materials that never arrived at our facility. The network centered on Brianna. She'd registered the shell entities using variations of her name or unrelated aliases, listing herself as managing member. Digital approvals bore her credentials, timestamps matching her known login patterns. But the scheme required multiple signatories for larger amounts. Richard's distinctive signature appeared on physical checks, Diane's on several electronic authorizations for transfers exceeding daily limits. Paul quantified the damage methodically. Close to $600,000 diverted in layered transactions designed to avoid immediate detection. Some funds looped through multiple accounts before disappearing into personal holdings. Others paid for luxury items, vehicles, home renovations, vacations, indirectly linked through credit lines. The mechanics crossed serious thresholds. Wire transfers between institutions in different states triggered federal oversight. Use of interstate banking systems for fraudulent purposes qualified as wire fraud. Concealment from tax reporting added potential evasion charges. Embezzlement from a company asset base made it a clear breach of fiduciary duty. I forwarded additional evidence as requested. Board minutes showing my limited involvement in day-to-day finances after delegation correspondence, expressing concern that went unanswered. Paul cross-checked everything against standard accounting practices, highlighting deviations no legitimate manager would make. He built the case layer-by-layer timelines, illustrating escalation charts, mapping money trails, affidavits ready for submission. When complete, he forwarded the package through established channels to federal investigators, specialists in white-collar crime who handle such referrals routinely. No announcements, no raids yet. The probe opened quietly, preserving evidence while authorities verified independently. Paul assured me the foundation was solid. Digital footprints and paper trails don't vanish easily. Reviewing his final report alone one evening, the full picture sank in. They weren't just taking money. They'd constructed an elaborate system, assuming I'd never look closely enough. But the realization that changed everything was simpler. Corporate ownership carries responsibility for past actions. Transfer the title and the new owners inherit the entire record: debts, obligations, liabilities. Criminal exposure tied to company operations doesn't evaporate with a signature change. It follows the entity. If they succeeded in forcing a settlement, if they signed documents accepting full control of Whitaker Tool and Die, every fraudulent transaction committed under its name would become theirs to answer for. The investigation already underway would pivot to the current principles. They'd walk straight into accountability they never anticipated. Paul verified the legal principle. Pre-existing fraud discovered after transfer still attaches to those in charge when authorities act. Courts recognize it regularly in succession or sale cases. The strategy formed clearly. Let them push for everything. Let them believe pressure and family guilt would force compromise. Give them the victory they demanded on paper. Then watch the consequences catch up. I filed away the report, deleted temporary files, resumed normal routines. Outwardly cooperative, inwardly prepared. The waiting began. The mediation sessions took place in a plain conference room at a law firm downtown, far from the shop and home. I arrived early each time, dressed conservatively, letting fatigue show in my movements. Across the table, Richard, Diane, and Brianna presented a united front, their attorney, outlining demands with practiced confidence. They wanted undivided title to the house grandfather left me, both vehicles, and absolute control of Whitaker Tool and Die. I listened without pushing back, nodding occasionally as terms were read aloud. When asked for my position, I spoke softly. I'm ready to settle. Transfer everything to them. I need this finished. Their attorney paused, reviewing notes to confirm he heard correctly. Brianna exchanged quick looks with my parents' surprise, giving way to guarded triumph. They pressed for details on timelines, ensuring no loose ends. Margaret Ellis sat beside me, documents organized in folders she'd prepared over weeks. She'd compiled timelines, employee statements, financial summaries, challenging their claims. Now her pen hovered motionless. In private breaks, she cornered me. Diana, this gives away your entire future. We can counter with strong evidence. Please think about the kids' stability. I maintained the weary expression, repeating that prolonged battles would hurt everyone more. She argued quietly about asset protection, long-term security, the precedent it set. I thanked her for the effort but held firm on acceptance. News traveled fast through mutual contacts. Friends who'd known me for years began reaching out constantly. One from my old neighborhood left long messages, voice cracking with worry that I'd lost perspective under pressure. Another, a business acquaintance who'd watched the company grow, drove over unannounced one evening, insisting we talk strategy over coffee. You're making a mistake you can't undo, she said. Fight for what's yours. Texts and calls piled up. They shared fears I was depressed, that isolation had clouded judgment, that conceding meant admitting defeat. Offers came, loans for legal fees, introductions to aggressive attorneys, even suggestions to delay for mental health evaluations. Everyone assumed the stress had worn me down completely. I responded briefly to each, appreciating the support, but reaffirming my decision. No debates. No hints at deeper reasons. Silence preserved the illusion. Meanwhile, I poured every spare moment into Sophia and Mason. School pickups turned into extended adventures, stopping at playgrounds where I pushed swings until arms ached, joining games of tag across grass fields. We explored local trails, collecting leaves or skipping stones at small ponds. Home evenings revolved around their choices. I baked chocolate chip cookies from scratch, letting them stir batter and lick spoons. Dinner requests were granted without question. Homemade pizza with extra toppings, tacos assembled together at the counter. Laughter filled the kitchen as sauce ended up on noses or flour-dusted hair. Bedtime stretched longer. I read favorite books with different voices for characters, answered endless why questions lay beside them, discussing dreams or school friends. Sophia confided small worries. Mason shared wild inventions he wanted to build. Those quiet connections grounded me, reminding why every choice mattered. Weekends brought simple outings. Farmers' markets for fresh fruit, libraries for new books, drives to quiet spots where we picnicked and talked about anything. I captured photos, mentally storing moments against uncertainty ahead. The concern from others continued. Margaret scheduled additional reviews, presenting revised projections of life post-settlement. Friends organized informal interventions over lunch, pleading for reconsideration. Their fear was genuine, that I'd sacrifice too much for peace that wouldn't last. I attended, listened patiently, then restated willingness to sign. Outward compliance masked inner certainty. Those days with my children built quiet strength. Their unconditional trust, daily hugs, innocent questions, all reinforced focus on what couldn't be taken. Whatever documents said, our small unit remained intact. The final hearing date neared. Routine stayed, consistent emphasis on normalcy for Sophia and Mason. Nights ended with extra stories, assurances whispered in the dark. I was ready. The day of the final hearing arrived under gray skies, the courthouse looming like any other weekday building in downtown Detroit. I walked in alone, dressed simply. No suit, just a clean blouse and slacks. Margaret Ellis met me at the steps, her face tight with last-minute concern, but I reassured her with a nod that everything was proceeding as discussed. Inside the courtroom, the air felt thick. Richard, Diane, and Brianna sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney Harlan. They looked polished, confident, leaning together in quiet conversation. Their eyes flicked toward me with unmistakable disdain, small, victorious smiles playing on their lips as if the outcome was already sealed. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with years on the bench, reviewed the settlement agreement aloud. Full transfer of the family home, the vehicle's complete ownership of Whitaker Tool and Die, all assets and liabilities included. She asked if I understood and agreed voluntarily. I answered clearly. Yes, Your Honor. Harlan's side barely hid their satisfaction. Brianna whispered something to Diane, who covered a smirk. Richard sat back, arms crossed, as though finally receiving what was long overdue. I signed where indicated, page after page, hand steady. Each signature transferred title officially. Margaret watched from beside me, silent, now accepting the path I'd chosen. The judge prepared to conclude, gavel in hand. Then the doors swung open. 2 federal agents in dark suits entered, badges, visible, expressions neutral. They approached Harlan, directly handing over a sealed envelope. The room quieted instantly. He opened it, scanned the contents. Color drained from his face. He leaned toward his client's, voice low but audible in the hush. Your family members have just been arrested. Brianna reacted first, a sharp cry escaping before she clamped her hand over her mouth. Diane gasped, clutching Richard's arm. He stared ahead, frozen, as reality hit. The agents stepped forward, addressing them formally. Warrants had been issued days earlier based on the investigation's findings: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Custody began immediately. Chaos erupted briefly. Brianna stood, chair scraping back, protesting loudly that it was a mistake, all my doing. Diane sobbed, reaching toward me as if for help I wouldn't give. Richard muttered denials, voice breaking. Bailiffs moved in to maintain order while agents cuffed them calmly, procedure standard for white-collar charges. I remained seated, hands folded, watching without expression. The judge banged her gavel for silence, adjourning abruptly. They were escorted out past staring spectators. Brianna's cries echoing down the hall. Harlan gathered papers mechanically, avoiding eye contact. Outside reporters waited. Word had leaked somehow, but I slipped away through a side exit Margaret arranged. Months passed before resolution. The case moved swiftly once federal prosecutors took over. Evidence proved overwhelming. Digital trails signed documents, shell company records. They tried separate defenses, Brianna claiming ignorance, my parents insisting they followed her lead. But coordination was clear. Plea deals came eventually. Prison sentences followed, years in federal facilities, not probation. Full restitution ordered, meaning liquidation of whatever assets remained after seizure. The house sold at auction, vehicles, repossessed, company equipment dispersed. I started over, smaller. A new entity, Whitaker Precision Works, leased modest space nearby. Loyal former employees returned one by one, drawn by honesty over higher pay elsewhere. First contracts trickled in from old clients who valued integrity. Growth came slow but clean, no hidden debts, no compromised books. Custody arrangements shifted permanently. With criminal records established, courts granted me sole legal and physical custody of Sophia and Mason. Visits supervised at best, but they chose distance as time went on. Contact ended completely. No calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation. Blood ties severed when trust shattered beyond repair. Looking back, the pain from that marriage breakdown prepared me in ways I never expected. It taught resilience, the difference between obligation and true connection. Being betrayed by those closest twice, once by a partner, once by family, stripped away illusions. Yet it clarified priorities. Strength isn't endless fighting. Sometimes it's strategic patience, letting consequences unfold naturally. Protecting peace for those who deserve it, myself, my children, matters more than forced forgiveness. If you've faced broken trust in marriage or from the people supposed to stand by you unconditionally, know this: rising again is possible. Stand firm for what's right for the innocent ones counting on you. Prioritize your well-being and theirs. Healing comes not from holding on to bitterness, but from building forward unburdened. Some bonds can't be salvaged. Cutting them free isn't weakness. It's choosing life on honest terms. That's what I did, and I've never looked back.